I'll be completely honest, I do not like this champion. Every single one of Aatrox's abilities suck. His Q feels clunky, his W is unreliable, and his E genuinely might be the most pathetic dash in the game. His ultimate, actually his ult is kinda cool. Still, over the last 10 years, I've barely played this champion. In fact, I think the last time I played him, his gameplay was still lore accurate. My inexperience, however, is why I might be the best person to test if you, or if anyone else, can play Aatrox mid. That's why I'm playing 50 rank games to see if Aatrox can work as a mid laner. To start, I need to figure out how I want to play Aatrox. In top lane he usually goes Conqueror as his primary rune. Personally, due to my background in assassins and mages, I feel much more comfortable with a burst oriented setup, so for the first couple normal games I ran Electrocute and started with either Cyclosword or Eclipse as my first item. This worked extremely well for me, and after only my first 10 normal games, I felt comfortable enough to dive straight into Ranked. Fortunately for the first few games of Ranked, I was able to perform surprisingly well. I would have been 3 out of my first 5 games and managed to get a quadra kill in my final placement match, putting me into Platinum 4. Honestly, I was a little disappointed with this, and I'd hoped to be placed slightly closer to Emerald, however, I quickly realised why I'd been placed so low. I still had no idea what I was doing, and had primarily just been winning games due to hand-diffing my opponents in lane. The next 6 rank games were a complete one-sided stomp, and not in my favour. These losses dropped me to 3 and 8, with a 27% win rate so far. I need to go back to the drawing board and pay a little bit more attention into how to utilise my kit and which items to buy and when. So I decided to check out 2 specific players, Niall and Luca. Both of these players are EUS challengers who specialise specifically in Aatrox. From watching their gameplay and guides, I learned Aatrox actually has a really simple but really strong combo, which should be used in basically every single fight. Q1 to secure your W, then Q2 to make sure the W will pull back, and then finally his last Q is guaranteed as long as the enemy doesn't have a dash. This is obviously very useful against top laners, but in my opinion it's even stronger into squishier and immobile mages such as Orianna, Syndra and Victor. Another thing I learned is that Conqueror overall just seems much easier to play than the Electrocute Lethality build. With the HP stats from the Bruiser items and the increased healing from Conqueror, making mistakes was just overall much more forgiving. Finally, here's a short clip from Luca talking about starter items and the resolve tree.
So now second wind, these are the matches where you normally would go D shield into. If you're a really beta male, you can go both second wind and D shield, but then you're not an actual Aatrox player, you're just a fake Aatrox player.
With my newfound knowledge, I hopped back onto the Rift and had mixed success. Until this game against the Syndra. This was probably the single most important game I would play on Aatrox, because I tried something that, in hindsight, I should have been doing from the start. I rushed more of Mount Mortius' first item, and for mid lane specifically, this item is insane on Aatrox. After this game, I would rush more of Mount Mortius basically every game, as long as the opponent was an AP champion, whether they were a mage, an assassin, even a support. I was building more and Merc Treads as soon as possible. Once I got to the halfway mark, I was 12 wins, 13 losses, 25 games. Somehow I brought my win rate up to 48%, and my success with this build would continue. I won my next game, 50%, and then my next, 52%. On my 34th game I would reach Emerald 4, and shortly thereafter I completed game number 42, unfortunately dropping myself back down to a 50% overall win rate. I had 8 more games to play, and I only needed 4 more wins. I would completely stomp the first game, going 9-0-2 against a Katarina. I struggled a little bit in the following match against Alessandra, but I was able to win due to minimising my deaths and allowing my 2 side lanes to carry the game. By this point I was very keen on finishing this challenge as soon as possible, and I had decided to play the remaining games in one day. So I queued up again. Maybe Riot was aware of this, because they decided to match me with some of the best players I have ever had the pleasure of playing with in Emerald. I load into game, minion spawn, enemy Jace just wants to fall clear, however my Shaco support manages to kill him on his red buff. In his frustration, he attempts to invade our Evelynn on Raptors and dies again. Less than a minute later, he tries to take the Raptors again and dies for a third time in less than 5 minutes. Of course, he rage quits, and the enemy team early surrender. Just one more win left. Fortunately for me, I matched into what I believe is one of Aatrox's best mid lane matchups. Aurelion Sol literally cannot play the game. If he uses Q, it gets cancelled. If he tries to fly away, it gets cancelled. Into Aatrox, I'm not sure if Aurelion is able to do anything other than either minion wave, pray he gets some stacks, or he sits on the tower and watches TikTok. Needless to say, 50% was secured, along with Emerald 3. I still wasn't quite done yet though. I had 5 more games left to play, and I could potentially get Emerald 2, and maybe even begin to scratch the bottom of Emerald 1. The next game would be a swift 20-minute win against Yasuo, and that would be the last win I would get on Aatrox. I should have gone off for the night instead of forcing my 10th, 11th and 12th consecutive games. Maybe I could have done a little bit better, however 52% win rate is still a 52% win rate. Now onto the tier list. Since Aatrox ended with a positive win rate, he has to be placed into one of the 3 upper categories. Looking back, I don't think I performed particularly well with Aatrox. I generally struggle with AD fighters and bruisers, and somehow I still managed to get a positive win rate with him. I also don't feel like there's a suitable replacement for Aatrox in the mid lane. The closest thing is probably Yone or Aurelia, but saying they're the same archetype is a bit of a stretch. Due to this, I'm going to be placing Aatrox into the highest category. Okay, next video. So obviously there isn't any Master Plus Alistar mid mains, so I guess Alistar's the next champion. See you in 50 games.